Hello everyone, welcome to the last video of AP Computer Science A. In this video, you're going to prepare for the second part of the AP exam, the FRQ. So before we get started, here's some quick information. On the AP exam, you'll have 90 minutes to solve 4 questions. Question number 1 is methods and control structures. So they will give you a class and some methods are already completed and some are for you to complete. Question number 2 is creating a class. So you will create an entire class with all the variables, constructors, and methods necessary. And this question is only 1 part long. The other questions have several parts. Question number 3 is arrays and array lists. And question number 4 is 2D arrays. And you may not use a compiler such as Replit.com. So after writing your code, you may not test it. That increases the chance of your code having problems, which may potentially lead to losing points. But not all problems will cause you to lose points. For a detailed view of what problems cause you to lose points and what don't, you may check out a scoring rubric. The FRQ is generally more difficult than the MCQ. The first time I tried doing one, I was completely stumped and had no idea how to do any parts. And that may happen to you, and that's totally fine. So if after seeing the questions you have no idea how to do any of them, then I would suggest watching the solution for one part and then trying the rest of the parts after that. So before I let you get started, let's go over this together. So each question will generally start off with a quick introduction of what the question's about. And then assuming that it's not problem number 2, it will show you what the class looks like. And it will have a number of methods. Before each method, there is a comment that tells you what the method is supposed to do and preconditions. And then if we're not on question number 2, it will have several parts and then the prompt for each part. And then you can write your answer down below each part. So now you can get started. In the description, there's a link to a Google Doc with the questions. So click on that and pause the video here. The solutions will start coming in 3, 2, 1. All right, so question number 1, part A. So basically, we want to make the get check method. So this is the process for determining what the method should return. All right, so let's first make the header. So we need a variable to keep track of the sum since we're adding together many products. All right, and then we use a for loop. So we start at 1 and go up to the number of digits in the number. All right, and for each digit, we add the current number times the current digit. So the current number can be determined by doing 8 minus a, because for the first digit, we're supposed to multiply by 7, and for the first digit, a is equal to 1, so 8 minus a is 7. For the second digit, a is equal to 2, and 8 minus a is 6, and so on. All right, and then times get digit num a. All right, and then after running the for loop, we want to return the last digit in sum, which can be determined by doing sum mod 10. All right, and that's the answer to part A. So part B, we want to write the is valid method. So basically, if the number except for the last digit, if get check of that is equal to the last digit, then it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. All right, so I already have the heading written here. So basically we want if, so get check of the digit except for its last, the number except for its last digit. So you can determine that by doing sum with check digit divided by 10. And if that's equal to the last digit, and that's calculated by doing mod 10, then return true. And then if not, then return false. So here's question number 2. So we have to create the step tracker class with these 3 methods. All right. So first we need to have 4 variables. So the first one keeps track of the minimum number of days needed for a day to be active. And keep in mind that all 4 of these variables have to be private. On the AP exam, if question number 2 doesn't specify that a variable has to be public, then it must be private. If you don't make it private, you're going to lose points. All right, and then the second variable we need is a variable to store the total number of days. And then we need a variable to store the total number of active days. And finally, we need a variable to store the total number of steps. And now for the constructor. So we take an int as a parameter, and we set min steps equal to that parameter. And you can also set all the other variables to 0 if you want, but since 0 is the default value, if you don't set those other variables, it's going to be 0 anyway. So you could put that, but it's not required. All right, so now for the methods. So the first one we're going to do is add daily steps. And this method doesn't return anything, it just changes some of the variables. All right, so first we need to update total steps. So total steps plus equals A. And we also need to update total days. And finally, if A is at least min steps, then we need to increase. All right, hold on. I forgot to put plus plus here. Then we need to increase active days by 1. All right, and now for the second method, active days. So this method is easy. You just need to make it return an int, and all it does is return active days. All right, and then for average steps, so this must return a double. So the first case is if there are no days yet. So if you say if total days equals 0, then return 0.0. And also, if you don't include this part, they're not going to deduct any points. However, you should still include it just to be safe. All right, and then if total days is not 0, then we return. All right, and you have to make sure that you don't do int division. So you have to cast to a double. So you say double total steps. So that will turn total steps into a double, and then divided by total days. All right, and that's it. And if you saw, I forgot a semicolon right here, but forgetting a semicolon is not something that will cause you to lose points. Now we're on to question number 3. So basically we have an array list of gizmos, and for part A we want to determine how many gizmos are both electronic and made by a specified maker. So we need a counter to count the number of gizmos that fit that condition. And you can use a for each loop to iterate through the array list. And I'm going to use a as the variable for the for each loop. So the condition is if a dot is electronic and the maker of a is equal to the parameter specified. So to determine the maker of a, you just use a dot get maker and then dot equals maker. Right, and then if this is true, then counter plus plus. And after running this for loop, we return counter. And notice here how I used a.getMaker.equals maker instead of the 2 equal signs. So when you're comparing 2 strings, it's generally safer to use dot equals instead of the 2 equal signs. Okay, so now for part B, so we need to use a for loop to iterate through each adjacent pair of purchases. All right, so you want to start at index 0 and go up to the index of the second to last purchase. So it's just purchases dot size minus 1. All right, and then we say if purchases dot get a, and then we use the dot equals method as the problem specifies. Purchases dot get a plus 1. Then we return true. And if after running this for loop there have been no adjacent pairs, then we return false. And that's it for question number 3. Question number 4. So we have a 2D array of lights, and part A is to write the constructor. So we first need to create the 2D array, and then we need to set each light to on with 40% probability. So to create the 2D array, we do lights equals new boolean num rows num columns. And then we use 2 nested for loops to iterate through the entire 2D array. So the first one is for the rows, and the second one is for the columns. So to get a 40% probability, we can use math.random. remember that that generates a random number from 0 to 1. So if we do math.random is less than 0.4, then that is a 40% probability. So if math.random is less than 0.4, then we set lights RC to true. And we don't need to worry about the case of if it's false, because the default value for a 2D Boolean array is false. Part B, so we have to write the method evaluate light, which returns either true or false depending on this process right here. So we need a counter to count the number of lights that are on in the column. And then we use a for loop. So we have to go down the column, starting with the first row all the way to the last row. So we end at the number of rows there are. So that's just lights.length. And then we say if lights, and the row would just be A, and we already know what the column is supposed to be. Then counter plus plus. And then we have to do some if statements. So the first case is if the current light is on and counter is even. So counter mod 2 equals 0. Then we return false. Second case is if the current light is off and counter mod 3 is 0. In that case, we return true. And if neither of these if statements are true, then we return the status of the current light. All right, and now we're done. So I hope this course was super helpful and fun, and if you're doing the AP exam, I hope you will do very well. If you like this course, make sure to share it with your friends because they might also like it. And also check out my channel because I have several other courses that you may like. And while you're at it, please make sure to subscribe because then you will be notified about future courses. Thanks for watching. I'm Jesse Lee, and I hope to see you in my other courses.